Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.
Good day, learners. Welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. I'll be taking you history. My name is Salau Abubakar Olaoluwa. The topic we'll be looking at today are sources of history. Sources of history. In the previous class, we've been able to examine some other sources of history, which this class is the continuation, or in which we'll look at other sources of history that we've not been able to look at. The learning objectives are these. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to understand how language can be used as a sources of history. The second one is that students should be able to explain how archival materials can be explored as a sources of history, and students should be able to understand how the study of anthropology aided the reconstruction of the past. So let's continue. The first sources of history we'll be looking at in this lesson is linguistics. This is the scientific study of language in understanding the relationship of people in the past. The study of language tree, the branches of which languages, and the relationship between the use of words helps in the reconstruction of the past. Then in this picture you can see the map of Nigeria and the language scales. This language scales help us to understand the similarity and the relationship between people that speak the same language, that their origin and traditions are related, and it helps us to trace the origin. For example, now the people of Ilorin, which is the north central region of Nigeria, let us know that they have more relationship with the Yoruba people in the southwestern zone than their counterparts in the north. Then we will now look at the advantage and disadvantage of the use of language in the reconstruction of history or as a source of history. The first one is that it serves as an alternative source of history, because when other sources of history is not available within the domain of a researcher, the language of people and how it's related can be explored in reconstructing their past. Also, it gives details of the origin of ethnic group. The ethnic people or people that speak the same language or their language branches fall in the same branch help us to understand that they have previous connection and likely they have the same tradition of origin. Also, it confirms the origin of a particular people. Then identification of ethnic group. It helps and aid in the grouping and categorization of people based on their ethnic inclination. And also the borrowing of words. The study of language helps us to understand the meaning and the etymology of words used within a language, and how those words are being borrowed, the origin and the history of how it find its way into another language. Then also adaptation of new idea. The study of language as a reconstruction of history helps in adaptation of a new idea into history and also helps in expanding the available sources of history. Then we'll look at the disadvantage of linguistics as a source of history. The first one is difficult to study. Linguistic analysis is a very new field of study that is not yet well popular and well researched, and this makes it hard and difficult to use in the study of history. Then changes may not help. One thing is that the changes in language and how words are being used over time also make it difficult to understand the perspective of history, because language is not static. Over time, the use of words change and the use of tenses and connotation also change over time, and this may extort and distort the authenticity of a research. Then discipline not well developed, and the development of the discipline is not well developed because it is not popular and it requires a lot of skill in going through linguistic study. Then coincidence in the use of word. The coincidence in the use of word can also lead to erroneous information and erroneous conclusion in the reconstruction of history, because when we are studying or using language as a sources of history, we tend to capitalize on the relationship of words and the use of sentence, and the coincidence in the use of word will also distort the credibility of a research. Then we'll look at archives or archival material as a source of history. These are well-organized places. Archives is a well-organized place or institution where materials are being kept and being documented for preservation purpose and for research purpose. The documents that can be found in archives include personal letters, early travelers and missionary record, trade record, government gazettes, and newspapers are all being kept and can be found in an archives. The advantage and disadvantage of using archives include: the first one, we'll be looking at the advantage. Easy to identify literacy level of the past people. When we are looking at archival materials as a sources of history, it helps us in determining the level of literacy of the people of the past, whether their history or their account has been previously recorded in a written form shows that they are literate or they are not literate. And if we couldn't find it in the archive, it shows the level of illiteracy and its extent within a given period of time and epoch of history of a particular people. Then identification of exact date of historical event. When we are looking at archival material, it shows exact date of the event because it is written and it is documented. The exact day, month, and year an event happens or occur are usually recorded and can easily be extracted in archival material. Then storing of historical information. Archives helps in storing historical records and information because all these records are being kept and properly arranged and being properly monitored. Then also it's easy to get historical information because it is written in record. You don't need to do guesswork. Historical record and information gotten from archives are written, so it is easy to extract. Then easy to interpret in as much as you understand the language through which the document has been written. It is very easy to understand and interpret, and also is good for literate society. For every literate society, archive is very good. An example of an archive we have is the one at Ibadan, the National Archive at Ibadan, where historians do go and other researchers in different fields of study do go to extract information and material. So we'll now be looking at disadvantage of archive. The first one is not renewable. Any information that is being kept in archives are not renewable. Even if it is being discovered that there are erroneous information in those materials or documents, it cannot be corrected. It just has to be left the way it is. So it is not correctable and it is not renewable. Then undocumented information cannot be archived. It is also important to know that it is only materials and record and information that are written that can be kept in an archive. Other one like artifacts and oral tradition and every other sources of history that can be used to reconstruct the past are not available in the archives. Also, it is also not useful for illiterate people. It's just that it is only the educated people in a society that can make use of archive. Those who cannot write or who cannot read or who are not literate cannot actually make use of archives. Also, it is difficult in getting information and not easily accessible, because for you now to have an access to documents in an archive, you need to go to wherever it is, which is usually far from people. That's the first one. Number two, you need to register in having access to an archive. It is not something you can just go and have access to it, and sometimes some materials are being classified and being kept in a private place whereby it is not easily accessible to researchers. So those are the disadvantage of archives. The next sources of history we'll be looking at is anthropology. Anthropological study has to do with the direct observation of the life of a people. Unlike other sources of history that looks at the things that has happened in the past, and anthropology does a direct study of the people they wanted to reconstruct their history. It has to do with the observation and understanding of the life of the people, their daily activities, their socio-cultural inclination, and how they relate with their past. So anthropological study can also be regarded as etymological study, and it is a study whereby the researcher has to bring himself down to the people to observe their lifestyle and to also be part of it, so as to have a better understanding of the history of the people. So we'll look at the advantage and disadvantage of anthropology, and before we go to the advantage and disadvantage, when we even look at this study, we can see that anthropology has to do with direct involvement in the life of the people, observing the object remains of the people and how they live their daily life in reconstructing their past and understanding their present. So the advantage and disadvantage of anthropology study are: one, the advantage is that it is a primary source of history. Anthropology is primary and raw on its own because it has to do with direct observation and direct extraction of information from people who observe it or observing what is happening and writing it down. Also, it gives information about people's culture. Anthropology focus a lot on the social interaction of people and their social cultural as well as the religious practices of a people. It doesn't just only looks at what has happened in the past, but it also looks at how things are being done in the present in relation with how they understood it from their predecessor. It also tells more about people's origin. Anthropology, by observing the people, it holistically understudied them, looking at every aspect of their history and origin, and it shows people's political and social organization. It also helps us in understanding the social the social dimension of the existence of people and how their socio-cultural and political hierarchy is being structured. It also corroborates other sources of history and revelation of people's culture and custom because it helps in promoting the culture and promote their social orientation. So we'll also look at the disadvantage of anthropology. The first disadvantage of anthropology is that it is very expensive and it is very risky. For example, now in understanding a local people, a researcher needs to go and live among them for the researcher to carry out an anthropological study. So it is very expensive to carry out because a lot of materials, a lot of resources is needed to carry out such research, and it is not commonly used. Just like it is very expensive, it is not very commonly used, and these are sources that are very rare to come by. Also, it is not reliable because these anthropological materials are not reliable because it has a direct input of the researcher, and the perspective and bias of the researcher could have affected the credibility of information extracted and information documented about a particular people, because it has to do with perspective and human nature. Then also, it's difficult to interpret. Anthropological sources are difficult to interpret in the sense that even while observing how people's life occurs, you may not even understand it if it is not properly explained to you. And in an instance where language becomes a barrier between the researcher, which is the anthropologist, and the local people who are being understudied, full understanding of the concept and context of traditional activities and socio-cultural events will be very difficult. And it is also not historical in nature because it relies heavily on social science and pure science. It relies heavily on social sciences and sciences method in reconstructing the past. It doesn't actually involve the use of historical method in documentation of information. Now we are going to numismatics as a source of history. This is the collection and the study of coins, tokens, paper money, medal, and other collectible materials as a source of history. And this also is very useful and important in the study of economic history. It helps to evaluate the trading activities at a particular time, and helps in understanding the volume of economic activity that happens at a particular period of time. Now we are going to practice question. The first question is, list 5 types of documents that can be found in an archive. As we've already talked about archive as a source of history, the documents that can be found in archives include written materials, it includes newspaper, it includes magazine, journals, and other written materials, and also government gazettes and the report of inquiry and the report of committee of inquiry or personnel, and includes the report of committee of inquiry established by government. Then the second practice question is, in what 5 ways can the pre-colonial history of Nigeria be reconstructed? And this is a WAEC question of 2018. When we are looking at the 5 ways the pre-colonial history of Nigeria can be reconstructed, this question is only asking us to mention and to state the sources through which the history of the past of Nigerian state or Nigerian nation before the emergence of the colonial master, and the ways through which the history of Nigeria can be reconstructed in pre-colonial time include the use of oral tradition, archaeological findings, written documents and sources, ethnography and anthropology sources, art form, study of serology, numismatics, study of linguistics, of the Nigerian geography. These are the ways and these are the means through which the pre-colonial history of Nigeria can be reconstructed. Thank you very much.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
In case you have any observation, reservation, or comment concerning the topic we just treated today, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us through the social media handles that is being displayed on the screen. Thank you.